All right, everybody. Excuse me. So today I'll be talking a little bit about the SDG of climate change and how it affects Japan, and compare it to various countries such as the United States and China, and kind of see where each country is. All right, so for my first little graph here, this is the per capita of CO2 emissions in the United States, Japan, and China. As you can see, China is at the lowest. They were also the latest to kind of begin their emissions. Then Japan, they started earlier. However, have kept it pretty steady in growth, and now it is beginning to come back down. The United States was the first to begin of these three. And have been growing, and in recent years been coming back down. We will see that trend later on. Here we have annual CO2 emissions. As you can see, China has just absolutely sprung within the past 50 years or so, just continuing to rise. The United States kind of starting to plateau and come back down a little bit, which is good. And Japan, honestly, pretty solid in that they are down uh, the lowest between the three countries. Honestly, Japan, they're not as bad as I thought that they were going to be. I thought that they would be up there with the Chinas and the United States, but it hasn't seemed that way in my research. All right, so here's the year-on-year change in CO2 emissions. The United States actually leads in the downward trend of CO2 emissions, and they are beginning to kind of really start to care about that process of getting that back down to where it needs to be. Japan, a little bit lower than China. China is still on the highest of the three countries. However, they're starting to come down as well. All right, so here are the cumulative CO2 emissions. Okay, so since 1750, the United States, again, they were the first to kind of start this trend going back to around 1750, and they have just continued to increase in CO2 emissions, which is not good. China, they're over here really starting to ramp up their CO2 emissions, which is not good. Should be seeing the trend go elsewhere. And then Japan, not so bad, not so good. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, CO2 emissions is not good at all. But they do a good job of kind of keeping it as down as they can. Still increasing, but keeping it relatively low. And here are the CO2 emissions by fuel type in Japan. And as you can see, oil takes up a big chunk, coal, um, cement, gas, flaring, other industry types. See that there. And here we have CO2 emissions by fuel in Japan. And as we can see, coal and oil are the big ones. However, like I said earlier, we are seeing this trend where they are beginning to kind of become conscious about what they're doing to the environment and starting to come back down. Um, so the coal is definitely leading that process and starting to come down pretty fast. And here we have my little diagram of everything. Um, Climate change in Japan. So some ways we can help this: use the use of public transportation, sustainable cities, autonomous vehicles, less fuel emissions, and up top it is covered, but it says and plant more parks slash forests into the country. I think that would be beneficial um, to see more sustainability in Japan and kind of helping climate change as well. Thank you guys for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Thank you so much.